More schools defying state governments to impose mask mandates. Joining us on 710 KURV is Quentin Brogdon, an attorney, a legal expert. Quentin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Now, a lot of what is happening here in Texas, and I think also in Florida, the two states that have at least been vocal about having mandates against mandates. You cannot have a mask mandate in your city or at the school district. So a lot of school districts across Texas are ignoring Governor Abbott's orders. So talk to us more about, I guess, the law behind it. What's going on? Can they do that? And what's going to happen next?
Good afternoon, Roxanne. You hit the nail on the head. Primarily, this battle is being waged in two states, Florida and Texas.
Yeah.
Not coincidentally, cynics would argue states where governors have been mentioned as political candidates in the next presidential race. Also in Arizona, South Carolina, Utah, Iowa, Oklahoma, there are all those states have mask mandates prohibiting local units of government and school districts from imposing them. That's what Governor Abbott signed back in May, an executive order. But since then, the landscape with respect to COVID has dramatically changed. We now have this Delta variant running amok. We have hospitals filling up. So some of the school districts in the larger urban areas in Texas, so, Harris County, which is Houston, Austin, Dallas, Bexar County, San Antonio, some of those school districts are defying the governor's ban and essentially saying we're going to require masks. I think Houston is waiting on the school board to approve it this week at some point, but that's where it's heading. So this is headed for a legal showdown with the governor. It's not clear what he's going to do in response to this. It's not really a black and white issue because it's definitely a health question. Everybody, your listeners are going to look at this through a political lens. That's how everyone's going to see it. It's hard not to. Mask wearing has become a political issue. Some would argue it should always be a health issue, and we should be guided only by that. But that's where it is, and these fights aren't going to go away anytime soon.
So, a lot of districts in Texas have either started school this week, or they're going to start in the next 2 weeks, whether it's next week or the following week. And if the districts do decide to implement mask mandates for their students and for their teachers, regardless of vaccination status, even though Governor Abbott has said they can't do that, and they still do, you mentioned the lawsuit happening right now. Before the lawsuit, I guess, takes place, or before it's finalized, or whatever the process is, districts can still issue these mask mandates, or they can't issue the mask mandate?
Well, it's a gray area. It's the governor certainly took the position that I, as the governor of the state of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, I have the power to prohibit units of local government, so the county judges and the mayors and school districts from issuing these mask mandates. And so that's what his order says. The question is he going to, given the dramatic turn and the uptick in these Delta variant COVID cases, is he going to go to the mat against all these school districts, or have the Attorney General for the state of Texas do that and try and fight it out in court? And my prediction is, if it goes to court, you're going to get, depending on the judges who weigh in on these things, some rulings that may not even be consistent. Some of the mandates may be upheld depending on the judge looking at it, and some may be overturned.
Who has the upper hand in this case? As an attorney, you see what is happening. You see, okay, you have Governor Abbott, who is, his orders supersede all other orders locally. And then you have schools that are pushing, we should be able to issue mask mandates if we want to. We're the ones voted in by families here that, in our community, whatever the case is. Who would have the upper hand?
Well, as far as the ranking in politics, in the hierarchy, if you will, the governor is the highest ranking official charged with enforcing the laws of the state. However, on the other hand, you've got this overriding issue of health, and when it comes to health, welfare, and safety, of the citizens, then, and in any event, the governor's power is not unlimited. So it's not an easy question to answer as to who has the upper hand. I think both sides are going to have arguments, and it's going to be somewhat in the eye of the legal beholder, meaning the specific judge weighing in on it. The governor's going to say, I have the authority to do this. I'm the highest ranking official. The state entities, the local government entities, rather, in the school districts, they're going to say, well, we have a duty to protect our students. One size does not fit all, particularly in these urban counties. We need to take this step to protect the students, and the governor should not have the power to prohibit that when it comes to the health and safety of the students in the district.
Joining us on 710 KURV is Quentin Brogdon, a legal expert and attorney. There's also a district here in the Rio Grande Valley. I'm reading here, the Brownsville Independent School District may sue Texas Governor Abbott over his executive order prohibiting mask mandates in schools. The board has scheduled a special meeting for this Thursday to consult with their legal counsel about a lawsuit. Trustees will also be considering passing a resolution saying the board should be able to make its own decisions about the health and safety of students and staff. Now, we mentioned that Governor Abbott, at the end, when it comes to the hierarchy of order, who's the most powerful one in Texas, obviously Governor Abbott has a lot of authority against local governments. Could the federal government step in this? And if they do, then would it be their word? Like, it's final?
Again, the president,
a lot of what ifs,
indicated, yeah, the president indicated when he was running for office that he was not going to support a national mask mandate. And that was one of the things he campaigned on. So if he stays true to what he promised during the election, then I don't foresee the federal government doing that.
Yeah.
The federal government has certain regulatory powers when it comes to the safety but that's of the citizens of the United States of America, but that's something else that would be litigated in court. There we are, a system of independent states, and powers are reserved to the state.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes what happens when the federal government does something is they do it through incentivizations. For instance, the speed limit. That was keyed to highway funds. So in other words, the state had the power when the speed limit was lowered to 55 for a period of time to say, we're not going to lower the speed limit. But then the federal government said, if you do that, if you do not lower the speed limit, then we are going to withhold your federal highway funds for your state, for instance.
Wow. Yeah.
So oftentimes what ends up happening is the federal government, when it steps in, incentivizes to avoid that issue of whether we could force it. So the fiction is you as a state can say no to this, but you're not going to get these funds. Likewise, the rate for DWI, how much blood alcohol, it was lowered nationwide from 0.10 to 0.08. And again, that was keyed to federal funds. The federal government said, if you don't lower it, you can leave it higher if you want, if you're in a particular state. But these funds you will not be receiving if you leave it where it was at 0.10.
So, like you mentioned earlier, Quentin, when it comes to who would have the upper hand in this state, I know I mentioned that even a district here in our community, Brownsville, is thinking about suing Governor Abbott. I know we also have other districts, other cities that want to do the exact same thing. And who would have the upper hand? It really is kind of like they both have good points, right? That would be kind of the easy answer to all of this.
Yes, there's no black and white answer that says the governor necessarily wins or the school district necessarily wins. Each side has answers to make, and that's why, depending on who is the decision maker, I think you could get different decisions. Literally,
yes, that's true.
One judge making a decision one way and another judge making a decision another way.
Well, you have so many different judges that already have different opinions on the same issue. And this is where, in my opinion, Quentin, it really stinks to have politics involved. And I know they're always going to be involved, but judges should be nonpartisan. Judges should, look at what is happening and look at the law of something. And sadly, like all of us, I think we're swayed by our politics. So it's crazy how you have multiple judges thinking different things on the same issue and would say one thing and another. If that were to happen, if one judge says, they're in favor of this districts. And if one judge says no, it's the governor. Who would have the ultimate deciding factor? Would that be the Supreme Court?
Well, it just
if it ever
depends
got
on
there.
which courts are weighing in on it. But a higher court, you can have courts disagreeing with each other at one level, and then it goes to a higher court. And I did not mean to imply that judges necessarily would be acting in a political manner.
No, I know you didn't mean that, but sometimes it happens.
Are fair-minded and fairly apply the law. My point was simply that given the arguments to be made on both sides, even if you're sitting there as a judge attempting to do the right thing, and that's what judges do, it's important your listeners understand that judges, the vast majority of judges, are simply trying to apply the law as they understand it and in a fair and impartial way. But if you have two judges who are doing that, depending upon how they view the law and the facts of the matter and the balancing of interests, you could conceivably end up with different results. That was my point, because it's a close enough call.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. I think what I meant to say is just not really involving politics, but when you have two different judges looking at one case and the way they interpret it can be different. And that's why we have different judges having different outcomes, right? But at the end of the day, Quentin, this is, like you mentioned, there is no black or white answer. This is like in the middle, in the gray. What do you think is going to happen? Where will this end?
Well, I think Governor Abbott faces a question now. Does he want to go to the mat on this, or does he want to, perhaps in a face-saving manner, and arguably for the interest of public safety, to say that in counties where it's at red level or at a certain level of capacity of hospitals filled or whatever it may be, as it is in, say, Houston, where one of the two county hospitals now is having to erect tents. They've run out of space to care, and apparently some patients are being sent out of state or having to be sent out of state. So based on that, the governor could very much with a straight face say, if the level of need and the direness of the situation has reached a certain level, then in those situations, in those counties, in those areas, I am going to allow there to be a level of independent control and decision-making with respect to whether masks are mandated or not, or whatever the issue may be. So there's a way, I think, for the governor to not open the floodgates, but to say if it has reached a certain level in these areas, then I'm going to allow, I as the governor, am going to allow them to exercise some discretion as to how they manage that.
Yeah.
The decision makers, the elected officials and the people who run the school districts. Yeah,
it's what you're saying is reminding me of how just the federal government issues incentives and incentivizes states to do things, kind of like maybe Governor Abbott meeting the districts and the cities in the middle. Quentin, thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. We appreciate what you do. That is Quentin Brogdon, a legal expert, our guest on 710 KURV.